Hi, I'm Liz Scuff. Welcome to this little channel where I'm exploring this idea of collaborative learning for cultural repair. And in this week's video, I wanted to talk about constraints and limits, capacity limits. And I mean, it's a little topic I see going around a little bit at the moment. And I think it's really, really crucial to cultural repair because in my analysis at least of some of the core wounds or issues within, say, like Anglo-Western European culture and how that is kind of spread around the world into many other cultures, is a delusion of no constraints and no natural limits. And so it's a cultural it's a way our economies operate, and it's a cultural message we continually get about that there are limitless possibilities and we can do anything and whatever else. And I don't know, I like to think it's a bit of a God delusion actually, but there's going to be a range of different ways in which our culture has kind of picked up that message. And one of them definitely, will come from capitalism, right? Where it's just like pushing people into really, really excessive levels of, so let's say, productivity. But we see the same pattern of sort of domination and delusion around limits, even in subaltern and alternative, radical social activist kind of spaces as well, right? The same kind of delusion about capacity and constraint. And so basically capacity or constraint is about like this gap between what we think we want to do and have and whatever, and what we can actually have and do. And so it's at a cultural level and it's at an individual level as well. And I think in that, if you caught my sort of 5 steps of cultural repair video series, I think it was the second video where I talk about, do your best to grow up. And one of the things about growing up is psychological maturity as an individual and as a culture. My way of thinking about it is realizing that there are limits and you can't have everything you want and you can't do everything you want. And, there are some basic realities of nature, of life, of death, and that there are just natural limits. There is only so many things I can do in a day, and there's only so many days I can go without sleeping before I'll end up in psychosis, right? Like there's just, I have a body, it has needs and requirements. And as culture, right, we have a planet, it has needs and requirements. So there's a parallel with these, I think. And so learning to lean into constraint and to limitations, I think, is really important. But it's not easy, right? Because I think we're so commonly and consistently across our lifespan conditioned and messaged culturally, right, that everything, things are unlimited, we can be whoever we want to be and there's no constraints. And we see it in marketing all the time. Like I was looking at an ergonomic chair the other day online, and honestly their sales pitches, they use these terms: limitless possibilities, unrelenting drive, unstoppable will, and an unquenchable thirst. And I was like, oh my God, I really like the chair, but I do not want to buy from you. Just like, it's like everyone's kind of doing the same thing in a lot of marketing stuff. And so we're constantly getting these messages around limitlessness. And so we start thinking that, okay, there's not limits, and I can keep, say, like productivity culture, right? Like this idea that you could keep optimizing productivity to be able to do so many more things, and if you just work out the right system, you'll get it sorted. And it's like we end up self-pathologizing and blaming ourselves because somehow I'm not limitless. What's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? Maybe I'm not hydrating enough. Do I need to drink more water? Am I, like all these different things, right? Where we start thinking, what am I doing wrong? That I am not limitless and that I have constraints and I can't do all these things. So that's partly why I think it's very dangerous. And then I just think it's very dangerous on a cultural level, right? The climate crisis is exactly a result of a delusion of limitlessness. So how do you do it, right? There's definitely going to be grief involved in accepting limits and limitations and capacity constraints. The grief of letting go of the fantasy of unconstrained possibilities or unlimited capacity. So grieving that loss, but it's a loss of a delusion. It's not a loss of something you could actually have. It's a loss of a delusion. And so there's a grief involved, and it's really, really valid. But you don't want to stay there forever, because this is also a sobering up process. And if we kind of stayed in grief for too long, we'd just kind of keep reinforcing a bit of a, let's say, disempowered state relative to this. Because then I think the next step is getting curious and open to the idea that capacity limits or constraints might actually contain a gift. Like they may actually have some, there might be something really good for you, for me, whoever, in not doing and having all the things. So kind of thinking that maybe they're not a negative. And I'm continually trying to learn this myself. I'm not sort of coming from a position of like, I'm really good at this. I have to catch myself regularly going, this constraint or limitation or whatever it is, it's not in my way. It is part of my way. And that kind of reframing has been super helpful for me to kind of be able to lean into what I think are limitations and go, maybe there's something really meaningful in this limitation. I certainly have had, I think from my mid-30s, a lot of health things that have kind of made me learn to rest. I was definitely very much a working too hard kind of person before then. And I was horrified, and there was grief and all the things about not being able to work as hard anymore. And kind of once I got through that, I also then had an openness to enjoying not having to work not being able to work so hard, that there was actually opportunity and gifts in not working so hard. There was other things that I was able to access internally, externally in the world. Like, I'm really into knitting now. You probably all know that I talk about it too much, but like, there's a lot of opportunity in limitations, I think. And I just think it's essential for cultural repair. So maybe that's all I wanted to say about it. Oh, that's one other thing. I'm listening to this book at the moment called 4,000 Weeks, which you may or may not have heard of. And I wasn't going to listen to it or read it because, I'd seen it around a bit. It's another self-help book. I don't know. And then I had a client say to me that found it profoundly healing. And I thought, okay, that's a pretty good recommendation. I'm going to have a listen. So I'm only the first chapter in, but now I'm going to buy the paper book because I'm not very good at really learning from listening. I'm better at reading. But it's already convinced me in the first chapter that I absolutely want to learn what this author, Oliver Berkman, has to say. Anyway, towards the end of chapter 1, he had this phrase that just really caught me, and he was like, allow yourself to be constrained by the rhythms of community. So it was, allow yourself to be constrained by the rhythms of community. And I was so touched by that, and it just kind of made me think, one of the things that this Western culture has degraded, right, is community, it's social fabric, and our skills, our psychological and relational skills to be in community. And so I work with and come across a lot of people who are desperately yearning for more community, but cannot tolerate other people. Like, other people get too irritating too quickly. And I don't think it's these people's personal psychology. I think it's a cultural issue, right, is that we have lost the skills of tolerating and being constrained by the rhythms of community and by diversity in others, and thinking that we have to really like and align everybody to be in close community, like or align with. So something about that I thought was really nice, and I just thought, yeah, there's something about constraint, not being able to have everything the way you want it, that must be really important for how we rebuild social and community connection as well. And I think it gets really tricky, right, because this does get wrapped up a lot, right, in power and privilege, right? Who is doing the compromising and who is constrained in different ways. So I'm not thinking that it's super simple, but I do think there's maybe a lot of people who get engaged in social change stuff who, have lots of burnout risks, or even just, people just trying to do a regular life, kind of feeling like they're not succeeding because they're trying to do all the things, because they keep getting culturally messaged that they should be able to do all the things. So, I don't know. I'm going to champion, no, you can't do all the things, so let it go. Lean into what you think are your limitations and see where that journey would take you. And I don't know, I'm finding it really useful in my life. I'm having a lot more fun and time in nature and slower, and I'm knitting a lot more. Yeah. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this constraints and capacity limitations kind of idea, and other places where maybe you've been reading about it or listening to it about the idea as well, because I think there's some really good stuff out there around it. Cool. Okay, thanks. Bye.